Greetings, Math 10 students. In this video, we're going to take a look at section 2.13, solving proportion equations. There are three different methods for solving proportion equations. The textbook only goes over one of them, but I'm going to present all three here so that you can pick whichever one works best for you. If you're in an on-campus class, we probably will have only gone over one or two of these in class, but you're welcome to use any of these. They all give the same answer, and they all have the same number of steps, so all of them are just fine. So to begin with, a proportion is an equation with two equal rates or fractions. Now if that sounds scary, don't panic. The fraction arithmetic that we've seen in previous sections won't really come up here. It's actually fairly straightforward to deal with these. And as I mentioned, there's three different methods for solving these. We'll take a look at all three in this video, beginning with the unit rate method. So here's the unit rate method. I have a proportion equation here. 4.50 over 6 equals x over 10. So I've got two equal fractions, a fraction 4.50 over 6 on my left, and then x over 10 on the right. And my goal is to solve for the value of x here. So to do that, I'm going to divide to find the unit rate. Whichever of these has two numbers, I can divide as long as the x is on top. If x is on the bottom, we'll take a look at what to do. So I'm going to go ahead and divide right here. And then 4.50, or 4.50 divided by 6, is going to give me, I just punched that in my calculator, and it tells me 0.75. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply it by the denominator of 10, and 0.75 times 10 is 7.5, and that's my answer. Now why is this called the unit rate method? Well, you can think of these fractions as rates. That's how they typically show up. So this example I kind of pulled from a real example of it costs $4.50 for a 6-pack of soda. So you get 6 bottles of soda for $4.50. And what you want to do is find the unit rate. So if it's $4.50 for a 6-pack, you divide by 6 and it's 75 cents, 0.75 per bottle. So if you want to know how much it's going to cost for 10 bottles, you multiply it by 10. So that's the unit rate method. All you're doing is dividing the fraction that has two numbers and multiplying by the denominator. Now that denominator part is important because what if you don't have a denominator? If x is in the denominator, you're going to have to flip both fractions and then do the same method. So I'm going to start by taking my left fraction here, 8 over 15, and I'm going to take the reciprocal, or the multiplicative inverse if you want. In other words, just flip it. And then same thing on the other side. 24 over x becomes x over 24. And now I can do the unit rate method. So I divide on the side that has two numbers, 15 divided by 8, and when I do that division it gives me 1.875. Now it's important not to round here. Whatever horrible ugly decimal your calculator gives you, just leave it in there and hit multiply by the other number, 24. The denominator has to be in the denominator. And when I multiply that horrible decimal by 24, I get a nice clean answer, 45. Most of the questions in the Hawks assignment, in fact I believe all the questions in the Hawks assignment for section 2.13 do come out to whole numbers. Let's take a look at our second method, the cross products method. This is the method the textbook goes over. It's an okay method, it works just fine. A lot of people like this method, so we'll take a look at how this works. So to do the cross products method, you're going to look at the two numbers that are diagonally across from each other. There should always be a pair of numbers that are diagonally across from each other. So in this one it's the 12 and the 20. And what I'm going to have to do is multiply those two numbers. So I do my 12 times my 20. And again, you can just plug that into your calculator. 12 times 20 is 240. And then whichever number is the odd one out, whichever one you did not use, in this case it's the 15, gets multiplied by your answer. So 240 times, or excuse me, gets divided by your answer. So I'm going to divide 240 by 15. So that last step you're dividing by the odd one out. So 240 divided by 15 in this case will give me a final answer of 16. Again, it will come out to a whole number in that Hawks assignment, though in real life oftentimes these don't. Alright, so our final method, our third method, is actually one that you might be familiar with. This is something that we did before when we were adding fractions. This is the equivalent fractions method. When we were adding fractions back in week 2, we had to take a fraction and convert it to a new fraction with a common denominator. So you might see something like 5/6, and it's supposed to be equal a fraction over 24. So to work this out, what we did is we divided the denominators across, and then we took our answer and we multiplied it by the numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 24 divided by 6, and that gives me 4. and I just take that 4 and multiply it by the top number. 5 times 4 equals 20. When you're doing this, you're always dividing with the x side first. Whichever side has the x, that's the side you started with. So I started with the 24 divided by 6. You've got to be careful because the order that you divide in makes a difference. Now again, what happens if the x is in the denominator? It's the same thing, except this time we're dividing on top. So we're just dividing across, starting on the x side, and in this case it's going to be 34 divided by 8. 34 divided by 8 again gives me a not very nice decimal, but I don't round it, I just write it out, 4.25, and I take that answer and I multiply it by the other number. So times 4.25 downstairs, multiplied by 12, and that's going to give me my answer of 51. So you can multiply in either order, that doesn't matter as long as you're dividing in the correct order. So to summarize, there are 3 different processes that you can use for solving proportion equations. They all essentially involve 2 steps. One is going to be multiplication and one is going to be division. Don't just guess though, make sure that you pick one of these 3 methods and multiply and divide the correct numbers.